Hey, Miss Lavery, it's me, Rebecca, and today we're going to be talking about tooth development. So, to do that, we're going to pretend that I am a tooth in white, obviously, and I had to go through 5 stages to get here, living my life, changing it up as a tooth, and living large in someone's mouth. So, we're going to be talking about those stages and basically the basics of what happens. We're not going to get too into scientific things. So, as usual, you can find the chapter outline and learning objectives in the beginning of the PowerPoint. I use Blackboard as well, so you can check them out on Blackboard too. And I highly suggest that you read over the objectives and go through the whole textbook before class. So we shall have a general understanding of this. So just from what I posted. All right, so let's get started. Hi. So this is Sweetie, and she's going to represent the first stage of making me, which is a tooth. So this first stage is initiation, and this is going to happen when she's a little teeny tiny embryo. Okay, so, kind of like when she was little, and I rescued her when she was very little. So she's only around for a short period of time, in this stage, but it involves induction here, which is pretty much like the start of something. So you're just like, hey, let's get going. All right. So we're going to think initiation, induction. Okay. So this is where these tissues are kind of like chatting along, and they're in the embryo, and they're going to communicate with one another. So, there's 3 main parts to her. And the first part is the stomodium, which is pretty much the primitive mouth. So this starts to, come together in the beginning of the 6th week of life. And the outer part of it is lined with the oral epithelium, and the inner part is lined with the ectoderm. So this inner stage of development consists of 2 little horseshoe-shaped bands, and those are basically tissues that are going to form her future jaw. So eventually the cells of the oral epithelium are going to grow deeper, becoming thicker, that kind of stuff, and produce what we're going to know as the dental lamina. So underneath that is a basement membrane, which is basically, like I said, just separates it. Below that is our ectomesenchyme. So these basically ectomesenchyme cells form from our ectoderm, but they have to do with crest cells, and we'll talk about that another time. So, Sweetie was the first animal I ever got on my own, and it's therefore she's basically the first step of making me. So if you can see here, I might be able to. She's missing a tooth, and this is called anodontia, and basically that happened because initiation didn't really go right somewhere in the dental lamina, and it was like, never mind, we're just going to leave this one out. So, I told her, though, that she could be really cool and have supernumerary teeth, which is extra teeth, but she didn't really like that idea because, she said she'd probably be a little bit larger than she already is if that happened. So, she may have some issues, but I couldn't live without her. So this is Buddy, and he represents the next stage of tooth development, which is the bud stage. So this stage got its name because of the extensive proliferation that happens here. So basically proliferation is a fancy way of saying controlled cellular growth. His proliferation was a little off. That's why he's a little bit chunkier than he's supposed to be. So Buddy is 8 years old, and he started this tooth journey in the 8th week. So in this stage, our dental lamina that came from Sweetie goes through proliferation, which is, the controlled cellular growth, and it's going to turn into 20 buds in total, with 10 in the future maxillary and then 10 in the future mandible. So that basement membrane that I talked about earlier is still there, and that layer of ectomesenchyme gets invaded by these new buds, all 20 of them. So Buddy is also a rescue, and he doesn't have any major issues, but he has one very large tooth. So that is called macrodontia, and that happened when basically there was abnormal cellular growth in there, so it was not controlled. But he's okay with it. He's cool. So now if you had, if that tooth were super tiny and wasn't, ginormous like it is for a big, shop a big smile, yay. If they were super tiny, it'd be called microdontia. Crazy thought, I know. It's not. Okay, so say cheese for the camera. Say cheese. So this is where things start to get crazy. So it'll be represented by my 6-month-old puppy, Mabel. And she has this cap on her head to represent what stage we're in, which is the cap stage. Here we go. She's getting a little warm with it on. Winter hat. Not a very winter month. So this happens between the 9th and the 10th week, which is how old she was when I got her. So because of this, we're in the fetal period. So there's still, proliferation going on, which is, that controlled cellular growth. But now we're going to bring into play differentiation, so which is unequal growth of those 20 tooth buds that Buddy helped us learn about. So when the buds change, they turn into caps. So that's obviously, if you didn't know before, now that's how it got its name. So the crown, the first crown of the tooth really starts to form here, and oh my goodness, really starts to form here, and it starts going through morphogenesis and ends up making something called the tooth germ. So the inner layer that I talked about with Sweetie, known as the ectomesenchyme, starts to go through some changes, and the inner part of it turns into the dental papilla, and the outer part turns into the enamel organ. So the dental papilla produces the future dentin and pulp, and the enamel organ produces the future enamel. Crazy. I know. No, you would never guess it in a million years. Yeah. So whoever created those names were obviously creative. So there's still a basement membrane between those layers that you have going on. And the membrane between the enamel organ and the dental papilla is, oh my goodness, between those two is the future DEJ, or the dentin enamel junction. So now I know you're thinking, could anything else crazy form from this ectomesenchyme layer? Well, we know that this one is normally all over the place, but she's really good for the camera. And, but just like her, she always gets a little burst of energy and just has one more thing. So that's the outside of the enamel organ. So it condenses into something called the dental sac, and that sac makes up the periodontium, which is the supporting tissues of the tooth. So, we'll learn about that in a future chapter. It's PDLs and bones and ligaments and that jazz. So this will consist of, what I said, and cementum. Yep. So just like all the other layers, there was the basement membrane here to maintain the separation. Okay, now we're done. So let's recap. Okay. So all those changes are going on, which is kind of like Mabel, changing from being 9 pounds to now like 35, I want to say. Yeah, so we made the tooth germ, which is made up of the 3 layers, the enamel organ, the dental papilla, which makes the dentin and pulp, and the dental sac, which is going to make everything that we need to hold everything in our mouth. So these 20 tooth germs are going to make our primary dentition, also known as our baby teeth, With all these big changes happening, some things can go wrong. So I'll just talk about, gemination and fusion. So, because she's a little not wanting to hang out right now. Goodness gracious. So gemination is a tooth that has 1 root but 2 crowns. So that'll happen if a tooth germ tries to divide but doesn't quite get to fully do that. And then fusion is pretty much like the opposite. So it looks like 1 really large tooth, but it's actually 2. So sometimes it could look like macrodontia, but we know that happens in Buddy stage and not in this one stage. So, all right, well, this is Mabel. Hey, Mabel, representing our cap stage. Yay! So here we are in the 4th stage, also known as the Bell stage, with Sassy Mamas. And she's 7, so she's much older than Mabel, and she goes through this Bell stage between the 11th and 12th weeks of prenatal development. So she's a bit more grown up, and things here are going to start to become what they're, eventually really going to be. So she's obviously not a dog and currently very angry. So, the way she looks is completely different. So, this shows that cap that we once had before, which we said was Mabel, is now changed into a bell for a little Southern Belle Sassy. So, the easiest way to say what happened here is pretty much, the enamel organ and dental papilla are going to differentiate to create enamel or dentin. So, this enamel organ has 4 different cells. The outer enamel epithelium, which is there to protect the tooth, and is going to act for a barrier. So that's like, the outer fur of Sassy. Below that is the stellate reticulum and stratum intermedium. And, these outer layers are pretty much going to help with the future production of enamel. So beneath that, we have our inner enamel epithelium, and it's the innermost part, obviously, if you didn't get that one. And eventually, amelioblasts will be formed there. So the dental papilla is also changing, and it starts to go through differentiation, and is now made up of, the two tissues called the outer cells and the central cells. So basically, inner and outer. These don't come into play until later, those 2 inner and outer cells, but will eventually pretty much become odontoblasts and the primordium of the pulp. So the last thing we have going on in this area is the dental sac. And in this bell stage, basically the dental sac is going to start to get more collagen fibers, and that's going to kind of help hold everything into place. So, the DEJ is still forming here, and it's still going to, that's our basement membrane. And so Sassy here is a rescue, and obviously is not a fan of the camera. But, through the last few years of her life, she has basically changed a lot. So when I got her, she was super malnourished and really underweight and just almost looked like a kitten. Right, I know. And, so, since then she's changed into be this normally very excited and happy kitty cat that loves to snuggle, but right now she's not feeling it. So, she's basically changed into herself. All right, so last but not least, we've made it to the final stage of tooth development and things that come together to make me. So Gracie here is to help us understand what's going to happen now. So this is the apposition and maturation stage where the tooth layers really go down and then start to calcify. So as we all know, the IE layer is forming from the bell stage. And once it reaches this point in development, it changes to become what we know as a pre-amelioblast. So these cells are going to induce the outer cells of the dental papilla to differentiate into odontoblasts. So they're basically like, hey, you're going to turn into this now, okay? Get it done. So the membrane we had before now disintegrates, and then it causes those 2 layers to touch. So once that happens, boom, those odontoblast cells are like, hey, you got to catch up to me. So the pre-amelioblasts then turn into amelioblasts. So both sides, the odontoblast and the amelioblast, go through apposition and lay down their matrix on their side. So since both cells are, we're going to assume, correctly made, they begin to lay down appositionally and really actually create the full DEJ. So that's the dentin enamel junction, and I bet you know what it creates: a membrane between. So if we have our mature dentin and mature enamel cells, they'll begin to lay down their matrix, which is eventually going to form the layer in the tooth that they actually are. So obviously that's dentin and enamel. It's, you have the DEJ, that sort of stuff. So that matrix is a gel-like substance and will go through maturation to eventually calcify. And, I think of this stuff as like an ice cube. So, Gracie likes ice cubes, so we'll do that. So, the matrix is basically like a gel kind of like substance. It's not liquid, not solid, whatever. So that's when we have like our water, and we're putting that in our little ice cube tray or whatever. And when we put it in the freezer, it becomes a solid, or it calcifies, basically, if you were referring an ice cube to a tooth. So, it's not the most scientific method, but it's a good way to remember. So that's how we can remember it too, because this one loves the snow and ice cubes. So, you know, to remember this step and the basics of what happened there and what can go wrong, we'll relate it to her. So, you know, she's also another rescue, and she was found in Kentucky and brought up to New York here, and she's currently in training to be a therapy dog. So, as with my other rescues, she's perfect in every way, but, you know, isn't always good when being walked on a leash. You know, she's a hunter and she pulls hard if she sees like a deer or a squirrel, that kind of stuff. So this is something we've had to work on, making sure she pretty much develops properly, and stops pulling on her leash. So she has to be good on that leash in order to become a therapy dog and basically mature correctly. So in this stage of tooth development, we can have enamel dysplasia and dentin dysplasia. So this is the faulty development of either layer, meaning that it's there but not correctly. So, you know, as for apposition and maturation, she's easy to relate to. You know, she is almost 4 years old but is very mature and quite an old soul. She loves giving kisses and belly rubs and digging holes in the backyard and laying in them. And we can remember Gracie for this, and she loves to lay down anywhere, like how tooth lays its layers appositionally. So, as you can tell, this girl is a very mature fluff ball, which happens in maturation when the tooth is going through its final stages, going through calcification, and really becoming a tooth. So, yay! It's a little much trying to get all 5 of what makes up me up on the couch, but I'm sure you get the gist by now. So, apparently we're all sleepy too. So, an easy way to remember the steps in order is it thinking I bathed the cat because she ate the mouse. So I wish I was creative enough to say that I came up with that, but definitely Googled it. So you have your initiation, bud, cap, bell, apposition, and maturation. You know, each of these steps are needed in order to produce a tooth, just like my animals are truly what makes up me. So without all my fur babies, you know, I wouldn't really be who I am. And bringing this topic back to something I know and genuinely love, obviously, and care about, really made me basically like remember things. So I was like, okay, you know, I can relate this back to Gracie because, you know, she's mature and, you know, obviously lays down all the time. You can't tell, right? Or like Mabel, who's crazy, but right now sleeping. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with that one. Weird. So try this out with other topics. My class is something I'll probably end up trying. You know, I'm not sure if I'll record it because it'd be weird, but, you know, actually thinking back like, hey, this is something I can relate this to this, or this to Gracie, or this to Buddy or Sweetie, you know, it actually puts something into perspective. So picturing my animals and how their personalities were basically compared to this was cool too. You know, they're all different in every way. They're all rescues, so besides Mabel. So, you know, everyone's kind of got a little bit of quirk about them, and Mabel's just all over the place. So, you know, I learned how big of a step that cap stage is, as I guess I didn't really realize it before. And, you know, using Mabel as a rep for that was fun. And, you know, I have a much clearer insight as to what's really going on when the tooth is developing. So, hope you enjoyed my video. And we'll have everyone say goodbye. Say bye. Say bye, Mabel. Mabel. Yes. Yes. Ah. Cheese. Yes. Good boy. Good boy. Here. Here. Come here. Yes. Oh, very nice. Oh, nice. Okay, girl. You're a boy. Sorry, buddy. Between the odontoblasts and the preameloblasts. That's a lot of words. Wow. And she goes to this bell stage between the 11th and 12th. Grace. Sassy. And I'm going to go through 5 stages. So Mabel only has 2 baby teeth left, but we'll have her do a big smile. Cheese! Yay! Pearly whites. So yeah, I floss often, right? All by herself, really. Whoa! No, don't leave! Come on! You know what she is. So, this is Sassy. Yay! Yo, yo, I'm Mabel. Hey! Hey! Whoa! Christ! What? What? Are you gonna be famous? I wanna be famous.